warm welcome to episode 67 of my Doll's House Diary. Now in today's episode I'm going to be working in the guest bedroom and making some accessories. So let's get started. So I just want to start by showing you the bedroom as it is now. So this lovely teal green colour is the predominant colour of the room, and I've done quite a bit in this room, so all of the furniture is complete and I've made a start on the accessories, and you may have seen that video where I made the toiletries for the dressing table. But obviously need quite a few more bits and pieces in here to make it look like a sort of lived-in guest room. So I've already made a start with this little set of luggage, and I didn't film any of these because I've actually already done tutorials for 3 of these pieces here on the channel. So this one I made as a shopping bag. There's a full tutorial for the overnight bag and also the suitcase. So this little toilet bag here, I just cut a piece of wood measuring 20mm by, I think I did it 9mm high, so that's 3/4 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch, and I've done it double thickness, so I used 2 pieces of 3mm 1/8 of an inch thick sheet wood, rounded over the edges after I'd glued those together, and then just put a piece of fabric on the front and back, and then a strip of fabric all the way around, and then I've just added some embellishments. So I've added a bit of piping, which is some 6-strand embroidery thread, and then some just tiny pieces of leather to go at each end of the imaginary zip, and a little label on the front there. And I think that's a really enjoyable thing about making luggage. So the basic sort of shape of your bags or suitcases is fairly easy to make, and then it's all down to the embellishments that you add. So I've done the bag slightly differently. I've made it smaller to the one that you'll find here in the tutorial, and with that tutorial I don't think I actually gave a size for the base, and that's really just because you can make the base in any size you like. So here I've made the base 33mm by 12mm, so I think that's about 1 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch, and then I've made the bag 25mm high. Again, I've added a little label there, that's just cut from a piece of glove leather, and I've made a little tassel as well, also cut from a strip of leather. You just cut very thin sort of slits into it and then twist that around, and then I stitched that on to the actual bag using, again, some embroidery floss. I really like the colours of that, so I've gone for this sort of grey stroke taupe colour because that picks out then that lovely sort of silvery grey that I've already used in the fabrics and the wallpaper in the room. And then with the suitcase, this is actually what I call a cheat case. So it is again just 2 pieces of wood stuck together, so 2 5mm pieces of balsa wood glued together. So this is obviously a non-opening case. I then just use 1 piece of fabric to cover, making sure that you've got the sort of start and end of the fabric along the front there to create the case opening. I've then glued the leather strips around, so just 4 leather strips, and then an extra little bit of leather there with the buckle on, and again I just cut a little tag there. And I was working on these for most of the day yesterday, and it really is a lot of fun sort of adding in the little embellishments and things, and you can really go mad with those as well. Have a look online at bags and things like that, you know, high-end bags, to see the sort of embellishments that they have on them, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with that. This I made practically the same as the one you'll find here on the channel, but again just a little bit smaller, and that's just because I wanted it only to fill half of the width of my wardrobe. I'm going to be storing it on the top of the wardrobe in there, so together with the bag and the suitcase I just wanted them to fit along the top nicely. And again, that's just a base of cardboard in there, so you just fold cardboard into the box shape and then cover it however you like. So again, that's another really simple one, and one that you can make in any size. So let's go and put these into place now. So there's the suitcase and bag on top of the wardrobe there, and I think they stand out really nicely against the paint colour on the wall. So I'd like to have a little blanket maybe folded on top of the suitcase, and perhaps an extra cushion or pillow up there, just to fill out that space to the left of the bag handles there. I've then put the little toiletry bag on top of the pedestal chest of drawers, and I want to do some obviously male toiletries as well. I'm imagining that there are a couple staying in this room, so I'll do some deodorant and aftershave and things like that to go along with that little toiletry bag, and perhaps a larger bag as well, which I'd like to make just using that grey taupe coloured leather. And then the little shopping bag I've put over here, and I'd like to fill that as well. So I'm thinking, I don't know, an extra jumper or something. I might just have like a little mock sleeve or something hanging out of there. Okay, so let me show you what else I'm working on at the moment. So a couple of things that I'm actually working on at the moment, and I only began both of these last night, so I haven't got very far. And the first is this little crocheted blanket to go on top of the suitcase, on top of the wardrobe. And for this I'm using a 1mm hook, so slightly larger hook than I would use for my crocheted squares, and a 1-ply Appleton's crewel wool. And this is part of the wool, or one of the balls of wool that I bought for the rug in the room. Now I will be going back to the rug, but I think I spoke about that in the last episode of Doll's House Diary. I'll be using the larger canvas, because the smaller canvas that I started using, I just wasn't getting on with it at all, and it was just getting quite messy, so I discarded that. But I will do a new design and start another rug, which obviously I'll share with you. But for this little blanket, this is really a sort of practice piece, but I think to be folded on top of the wardrobe, this is going to be fine. And I'll just sort of fold that into a square. So I just did a chain of stitches as wide as I wanted the blanket, and then I'm basically just going along and doing a treble crochet into each of the stitches, and then just turn and come back the other way. So I think that's going to look quite nice once I've got a little bit more on there. I think that's 3 or 4 rows at the moment. And because I just sort of left the wool loose like this, it is getting in a bit of a tangle, so I think I might have to start balling it up from the other end. Otherwise I'll just forever be untangling the next bit of wool. So that's that one. I'm just going to pop the hook back into the stitch there so it doesn't unravel. And I'm not finding this as easy to work with as the crochet cotton. It feels quite coarse, so it's as if the hook keeps getting stuck in the wool or going between the ply. So I do have to keep sort of unravelling and then starting again. But like I say, I only began it last night, so I'm sure I'll sort of get used to using the wool. So I'll pop that to one side. And then I'm also knitting a blanket, or a throw, and this is going to sit on top of the blanket chest in there. So again, I didn't actually count the stitches. I just sort of almost went to the length of the needle with stitches, and then I'm just going to use I think it's called a stocking stitch, so a line of plain and then a line of purl. And again, I've only done a couple of rows on there so far. And I also don't know the size of the needle. They don't actually have sizes on them. I chose the largest of my knitting needles, and this is probably about 1mm wide. So if you're a seasoned miniature knitter, you probably know what the size of that would be. So do pop that in the comments if you know the sort of number of the millimetre thick knitting needle. But just a smaller needle really, and I don't mind if it looks like quite a chunky blanket when it's done. And again, that will be folded on top of the blanket chest, using that lovely sort of soft grey to coordinate with the bedding. So I'm also halfway through here a round crocheted cushion. Now I did have a couple of silk cushions at either side of that central crocheted cushion, but unfortunately they succumbed to the damp in the doll's house, so I had to get rid of those. So I'm going to make 2 of these round crocheted ones, both in this lovely silver grey colour. Now, since putting the bubble wrap behind the doll's house, the damp problem does seem to have stopped. So hopefully that will be the end of it now. It could of course be because we're getting slightly warmer weather now, so I'll have to keep my eye on that, but hopefully, touch wood, that won't happen again. So I'll make 2 more of these, and for this I'm using my 0.5mm hook, and this lovely silver grey is number 927. Okay, so I now want to dress this little unit, and this is the chest of drawers that sits to the right hand side of the dressing table. So I want to dress it so that it's sort of dressed to this angle, which is the angle that you can see from the front of the doll's house. And I know I always say that, but do always have a think about the position that you're dressing to, because if everything's got the sort of sides or backs facing towards the opening of your doll's house, it's not going to look very interesting. And actually having things at an angle on there is going to look really nice. So I'm going to start off with some toiletries. Okay, so I've printed off some labels here. I've actually done 2 of each, so I've just got 3 different items here. Some deodorant, some aftershave and some hair wax. And I'm actually going to begin by putting some clear tape over them before I cut them out. And that just gives your labels that nice sort of realistic sheen. So then what I've done here is cut some pieces of dowel that I'm going to wrap the labels around. I've got a piece there for the hair wax, and then I've done 2 pieces for the deodorant, so I'll put the label around that, and then I've made a separate bit there for the lid, and then just a little square of wood there for the aftershave. So before you glue your labels into place, if it's going to be a square or a box, just fold in your lines before you start to glue it down, and that way you'll be able to fold it easier around your little piece of wood. And then what I'm actually going to do is colour the lid and the hair wax pot using this silver pen. Okay, so that's those 3 done. Now I haven't stuck those into place yet, just because I'm going to make some other bits and pieces to put on here, and I'll obviously glue them all into place once I've made enough to fill the top. But really pleased with how that's looking so far. Okay, so I'm going to make another little toiletries bag just to sit behind this one, and this time just slightly larger. So if I just show you that, it will sit there like that. So I've just done it a couple of millimetres wider and a couple taller, so we get a nice sort of background to that one. So I made this one 23mm wide by 15mm high, and I've used again a piece of balsa wood which is 6mm or 1/4 of an inch thick. But obviously toiletry bags can be, you know, a variety of sizes, so just choose something that you think looks right and goes with what you've already made or other bits and pieces you want to display it with. So we're going to begin then just by very gently rounding the 2 top corners of this piece. So hold it against your sandpaper at a 45-degree angle, and as you sweep it towards you, bring it into an upright position. That, and you just want to take the corner off. You can do as much or as little as you like. I'm going to do a few more sweeps on there, like that, and then do the same at the other side. And I use balsa wood for things like this just because it's very easy to cut in the thicker sizes and easy to shape like this as well. So once you've done that, you can just tidy it up with a small piece of sandpaper just in your hand, just to make sure they're even. And you've got a nice curve at each side there, like that. And now we're ready to cover it. Okay, so for this bag I'm going to do the opposite that I've done for that one. So I'm going to use the glove leather as the main colour of the bag and then use the fabric to make the little labels and zip pulls. So first of all you just want to turn your fabric over, or whatever you're using for the main part of your bag. Place the piece of wood on it, and we're now going to cut a piece to stick to the front and back. So just draw around that. Snip it out and then cut yourself another one. If you're using a fabric that is likely to fray, then you might want to cut it a little bit bigger so you can just sort of stick it around the top and bottom, so you'd sort of come over onto the edges of the piece of wood, and then when we stick the longer piece round you'd cover that up. See my pencil lines there. If not, I've cut along the wrong line there as well, so you can actually hold it against a piece like that and then just trim around it. I'm going to be putting piping around the edges, so all of these raw edges will be covered. Okay, so cut 2 pieces like that. Okay, so glue those pieces into place. I'm going to apply the glue to the back of the fabric. And press that into place. If you've got any little overhangs, we can trim those off once the glue has dried. Same at the other side. Okay, so once those 2 pieces have dried into place, trim around as close to the piece of wood as you can, and then you want to cut a strip that is going to go all the way round, joining in the centre at the bottom there. So just measure your length and depth, and then cut your fabric so that it goes all the way around like that. And you want it to actually come out to the edges of your front and back pieces. So cut it to that width rather than just the width of the piece of wood. And we're now going to glue this into place as well. And it is so much easier if you are using this glove leather. Like I say, it doesn't fray, so it's a lot easier to work with than fabric where you'd need to do seams and hems and things. Or hems rather than seams. Glue on there. So make sure you've got that join at the centre of the bottom there, lined up along your front edge, and then carefully feed it around. And this glove leather does stretch a little bit as well, so if you've got a little bit extra at the bottom, once you've curved it around you can just snip that off. Like I have there. So press it down and just snip that off. We're now ready to add the piping. Okay, so for the piping I'm going to be using this lovely sort of pale silver 6-stranded embroidery floss, and this was left over from a kit that I did a little while ago, and you always get more in those kits than you need, so it's always worth keeping hold of for other projects. So what you actually want to do is apply this around the front edge of your long strip of fabric. So apply your glue, and I'm not going to cut the floss to length yet, and then we'll stick it on and trim it to size. And just put a very thin line of glue around the gap there, and I'm just using my Gorilla Wood glue for this, as I did for all my other sort of fabric projects. I think it works really well with fabric. And you don't need much glue either, so I'm just taking a little bit of that off, and then let's lay this around So it doesn't really matter where you start because we'll try and sort of hide the join. I'm just going to trim that off as well. I'm going to start at the bottom there as well. And that's going to be hidden behind my other bag. So, and then just very carefully feed it around, making sure you're not cutting corners. That's in the corner of the bag. I think this silver grey goes really nicely with the colour of the leather. Now press it down, and then once you're back to the beginning, just snip that off. Put a bit more glue on if you need to. I'm just going to pop a bit on there. Just twist that round a little bit. Press that down. Okay, so do that at both sides of the bag. Okay, so that's both sides of piping done, and then I've just stuck a tiny square of fabric on there for just a little label. And then what you can do, either using your scissors or your craft knife, just to make a little fake zip along the top, is just run it very gently down the centre of the leather there. Just to give the indication of a little zip there. Go along like that. And then I'm just going to put a little zip pull at one end, and again I'm going to use my fabric for that. I'm going to just trim it a little bit more, and then put a little point into one end. And as I said earlier, it's adding the embellishments that really is the fun part. So really have a think about what you want on there. You might want a little tassel or something. I'm just going to stick that on there. And there we are. Another little toilet bag. Okay, so that's all of my pieces glued into place. I really like how that looks, so bear in mind that that's the sort of angle that we'll be looking at it when we're looking sort of directly into the room. And then I've just added a hand towel and a flannel on the edge there. I've got a little bit of space left, so I was thinking maybe there I could have a little brush or a clothes brush, and then I might have a go at making a little shaving mirror just to stand at the back there. I think that might look quite nice, and then add that sort of little bit more height at the back of the display there. But that's it for now. I'm going to go and put this into place in the bedroom. So another thing that I completed is the little round cushions. Now I did put them both on the bed with a square in the centre, but it looked a little bit like two eyes and a nose, which I wasn't keen on, so I've swapped those around and then put the second round one here on the chair. I may make another couple of fabric cushions to go at the back of those square crocheted cushions, just because you can't tell from the front, but they're sort of quite far back from the round one at the moment, so I might just make another couple of square ones to go there. You may notice that I've removed the lamps, and I'm going to remake those, and I'll hopefully get around to that in the next episode. I've also got to do a display in the little shopping bag, which I'm looking forward to doing, but again that will have to wait until the next episode. And the other thing I've done is just remove the roses from the mantelpiece there, and I actually want to use those in a little round vase on top of this chest of drawers. So I'll be redoing that in the next episode as well. And I can't wait to get back to this room. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode and that you'll have a go at making some of those accessories. Now, as I said earlier, the shopping bag and the overnight bag and the suitcase as well are available here on the channel, and you can just find those by searching Julie Warren bag or Julie Warren suitcase. They are quite easy to find, or just look in my miniature playlist. Now, I would just like to say a huge thank you to each and every one of my patrons who make these videos possible. And if you would like to see more of my content, head over to my Patreon page where you can join from as little as $1 a month. And over there I share 3 videos a month, including a monthly vlog where each month is a different subject, anything to do with dolls, houses and miniatures. You can also watch my 1940s Dolls House series over there. So far there are 34 episodes available to watch, and I'm basically turning a Mountville doll's house into a 1940s family home. You'll also receive a monthly furniture tutorial, and so far there are 70 tutorials. And to receive those, you can just join as a Tier 3 member. Once you join, you unlock every single upload that I've shared so far. Plus, if you join for a year in advance, you receive a 10% discount on your membership fee. If you're able to join, I would really appreciate it, and I look forward to welcoming you as a little bitzer. Okay, so that's it for today, and I'm going to be back as soon as I can with another episode. So I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.